Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's workshop. Today, I'm going to be discussing behavioral interview questions with all of you. And I hope that you find it useful. And if you have an upcoming interview, then hopefully this will definitely help. So like I said, today's all about behavioral interview questions. And so really, when an employer is interviewing you, the purpose of it is to help determine if you're the right person for the job. And a lot of these behavioral interview questions really help them figure that out. So they do ask different types of questions. So I'll start with kind of talking about all the different types of questions that you might get asked in an interview. They're obviously going to ask you questions about your work experience. They're going to ask you questions about your education, your knowledge, your job duties that you did previously. They're going to ask you questions about your skills, your transferable skills, and also your job specific skills as well. But then today, what we're going to talk about is those behavioral questions. And those interview questions really help employers see how you would act in certain situations. And that's really useful because, if they can see how you did things before, that's a really good indication of how you're going to do things in the job that you're applying for. So the key for these questions is to really, as much as you can, have those questions memorized and tailor your answers to the job that you are actually applying for. So your answers might not be the same for every interview, because what you've really got to do is you have to be able to decide, okay, what is this employer actually looking for? What do they want to hear? What's going to impress them? So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some of the more common behavioral interview questions, and also talk about how to answer those questions. So you kind of have an idea of what they're looking for. And also, I'm going to be getting you to think about your own experiences so that you're ready. The next time you get asked one of these questions, or if you think going into an interview they might ask you this question, you will be prepared. You will have an answer ready for them. So, one of the most common questions that people get asked is, tell me about a time when you dealt with a challenging customer. Um, and keep in mind, too, that customers can also be clients. So, in my job, I have clients. Customers can also be students. And customers can also be parents. So if you are maybe a teacher or you work in a daycare or a tutoring center, your customers might actually be the parents. If you're working in a school, for example, same thing. They could be students. They can also be the parents. So just anybody difficult that you've had to deal with, somebody who, maybe was challenging, maybe was upset. And the employer, what they really want to know is that you can keep calm in these situations, and they want to know how you would deal with it. So there's lots of different ways to answer this question. I'm just going to give you a little example that I came up with. And this is quite a common one. So if you're working in retail, for example, and you have a customer who comes in who's very upset, maybe they wanted a cash refund for a product. You knew that they were very frustrated, so you stayed calm. You made sure that you were listening. While explaining to them, I can't offer you a cash refund due to our company policy, but I can offer you some in-store credit. Maybe you also recommended a replacement product that was similar to the one that they had bought, but this one actually better suited their needs. So you've kind of solved their problem, and you've also, really helped them to get a product that they need. Okay, so that's a really good example, and one that perhaps you could use. But thinking about your own experience, have you ever had to deal with an angry customer or an angry student or an angry client or parent? What did you do to deal with them? So how did you handle it? Did you show empathy towards that person? Oftentimes when somebody comes in and they're upset, with a product that they bought or a service that they received, a lot of the time you can really bring them down just by showing that you understand why they're angry. Saying like, if I was in your situation, I wouldn't really be happy about this either. Please tell me exactly what's wrong so I can try to solve the problem. And trying your best to make sure that they're satisfied. Oftentimes, you as the frontline person, maybe you don't have all the power to solve their problem, but you can certainly make them feel like they've been heard and that you're going to do everything you can, including perhaps talking to a supervisor. So, again, think back to your experience. Have you ever had to deal with a situation like this? How did you deal with it? And the key here is that you want to come out looking like you know how to solve these types of problems, that you know how to deal with, challenging clients or challenging customers, because we've all had to deal with it. Pretty much in every job, at some point, we're going to have to deal with someone who's challenging us or who's upset with us. So really, really think about that one. That's a very common one to be asked in an interview, as to how you would deal with a challenging customer. Next question that a lot of people will be asked is, to talk about a time when you made a mistake, and how did you handle it? So everybody makes mistakes in their work. I make mistakes. I've been doing this job for 5.5 years, and I still make mistakes. Everybody does it. It's normal. So to say to an employer that you never make mistakes is probably a little bit dishonest and not really a good thing to say. They actually want to hear, how you can, solve the mistake that you made, without blaming someone or kind of like deflecting it onto someone else. They want to know that you can own up to your mistakes, because that's a really important thing to be able to do, is to say, you know what, I did make a mistake. But they want to know that you have the ability to solve it as well, and also to learn from it, which is really important, because I think one of the most frustrating things is not that an employee has made a mistake, but it's the fact that they didn't learn from it and they continue to make the same mistake over and over again. That is really frustrating for employers. That costs them a lot of time, and consequently, that costs them a lot of money. So they want to know that if you do make a mistake, that you learn from it and you'll put things in place to ensure that it doesn't happen again. So an example from someone is, I contacted a lead that my colleague was already working on, and I ended up taking their sale, which in sales is not really a good thing. When I caught the error, I realized that I'd forgotten to check the client database before reaching out to the lead. I apologized to my colleague, split the commission with him, and then I put some measures in place so I'd always remember to check the database before reaching out to clients. Okay, really good answer, because this person owned up to what they did. They solved the problem, but then they also put some measures in place to make sure that this situation wouldn't happen again. So think about your own experience with this question. Have you ever made a mistake? You probably have, because we all do. What happened? What happened? What did you do wrong? How did you learn from that? So what systems or procedures did you put in place to make sure that it didn't happen again? Did you own up to that mistake? Did you make it right? How did you make it right? For me in my job, for example, if I get a new client, there's a lot of paperwork and there's a lot of things that have to happen in order for that client to be registered, to be a registered client. And so when I first started working Yes, I found that to be a bit challenging, because sometimes I would forget some of the steps, and that would only become apparent when I went to, check over my files. And so I said, you know what, I can't have this anymore. I need to have a system in place so that this doesn't happen. And so what I did was I created a little spreadsheet, with all the steps listed out one by one. This is what I have to do in order. And then as I do them, I just check them off. Simple as that. Okay, so it doesn't have to be a really big solution. It can just be as simple as creating a checklist that you refer to every time you register a client. Same goes for if I have to close a file. If a client no longer needs our services, there's certain things that I have to do, and so I make a checklist so I don't forget them. And so I make sure that everything is done, which makes sure that if we get audited, everything is as it should be. So again, the answer to this question, it doesn't have to be very complicated, but do think about a time when you made a mistake, what you did about it, and then more importantly, what you did to ensure that you weren't going to make that mistake again. Next question that people get asked a lot is to tell me about a time when you had to manage, multiple responsibilities. How did you handle that? So we've all been in that situation where we're juggling a bunch of things. My previous job was being a teacher, so that's kind of what you do all day is to handle multiple responsibilities. But really think about that. Like, how did you do that? Because employers really want to know if you have more than one thing going on at a time, can you handle that? Because there are certain people who don't do well in those situations. Some people can work very methodically and they do very well if they handle one task at a time. But some jobs require you to have many different things going on at once, and you have to be able to balance that. So the employer asks this question so they know if you're going to be the right fit. An example answer is, my work partner left for a new job right in the middle of a major project, and all of her responsibilities were left to me. It was a huge challenge. I spent some time prioritizing the project steps, created a timeline for keeping everything on track, and I ended up putting in some extra hours. However, the project was completed on time. Okay, so again, a fairly easy answer, but it shows that this person knows how to deal with multiple priorities, keeping a list, being organized, making sure that you know what has to get done, because that's going to happen sometime in your job. Maybe you're working retail and the person that you're working with doesn't show up. And so you have to be able to deal with all of the responsibilities of your job and their job that day. And it's not fun, but it can also show an employer that you're a very good employee to have around if you can handle those multiple responsibilities really well. So thinking about your own experience, think about your organizational style. So how do you make sure everything gets done day to day? That's probably what you're going to rely on if you have to handle multiple responsibilities all of a sudden. So, do you make a list? Do you have reminders on your calendar? I love my Outlook calendar and I put reminders and everything, and my whole life is on there because that's what works for me. Have you ever had to change priorities in order to get something done at work? So maybe you went into work and you thought, oh, today's my day, to be in the back doing merchandise. And then all of a sudden, your colleague has to leave. And so you're trying to get that done, but you're also helping customers at the front. Has that ever happened to you? A situation where you've had to change pretty quickly what you had planned to do for the day? Have you used spreadsheets or other software to stay organized? So all of these things, thinking about that with your experience can help you think about the answer to this question. But it is a really good question, and it's one that people will get asked a lot. Next question is, tell me about a time when you went above and beyond to deliver excellent customer service. So again, this can be in any job. It doesn't necessarily have to be retail. I work with clients and I used to work with students and then as a consequence, their parents. And so really thinking about when did you deliver some, exceptional service in your job? And saying that you go above and beyond every day is a bit of a cop-out answer because there's always times when we just do more, right? When we feel like, today I'm going to help this person, or this person really needs my help today. So I'm going to go above and beyond. And one of my own personal examples of this is, we have a resource center downstairs where people can come in and use our computers. If clients want to come in and print off a resume, that sort of thing, they can come down and use that whenever we're open. And one day, I happened to be walking through the resource center, and there was a client in there who was rapidly trying to get a resume done, and I could tell that they were getting a bit frustrated. So I wasn't scheduled to be the resource counselor that day. My job was not to be working downstairs, but I could see that, there was a lot of clients in there. The resource counselor was super busy. So I just said, you know what, I'm going to take a few minutes to help this client. I sat down with them, quickly helped them edit their resume, helped them make copies of it. And you know what, it actually turned out that they were on a time crunch. They had to get this resume done fairly quickly so they could apply for a job that closed. I think it was something like in an hour, like it was a very rush. But they really appreciated the fact that I took, I think it was like maybe 5-10 minutes out of my day just to work with this client, but they really appreciated it. And as a consequence of that, our whole organization looked good because they came in there, they got the help they needed, somebody made sure that they got it done. and they felt really good going out. When they leave our building, we want all of our clients to feel great. We want them to feel like they've made progress. We want them to feel like they've been supported. And so that day, I made sure that happened with this client because I knew that my other colleagues were busy. So thinking about your own experience, did you ever go above and beyond for someone? Maybe you were working in retail, and somebody was coming in and looking for like a special outfit to buy and you helped them. It can be anything. Did you help out other colleagues so everyone could benefit? Like in my case, I helped out a client, but it made all of us look good. It made our whole organization look good. So really thinking about a time when you went above and beyond for someone, because that shows that you care as well. And it shows that you're willing to kind of maybe do things that aren't really your job, but you do them anyways because you want people to be happy with the service that your organization provides, which is a really big thing because when people leave happy, they tend to come back. And when people come back, that means more money for your business, and more money for your business means you get to keep your job. So, in a way, there's definitely a cycle there. But we definitely want to make sure that we're doing that. And you want to have an answer prepared for this question. You want to be able to answer this and have a story ready that is related to the job that you're applying for, if at all possible. So kind of related to the last question is this question. Tell me about a time when you showed flexibility at work. So, we all apply for jobs, and with that job comes certain job descriptions, right? So there's certain things that you're supposed to do and certain things that, maybe is someone else's job at the organization. But being flexible is so, so, so important. And in our jobs, if we want to be those employees that, everybody really likes, everyone's always happy with, then sometimes we have to help out when needed. Sometimes we have to show a bit of flexibility, to make sure that the organization can run. Another one of my personal examples, and if any of my clients are watching, that sometimes, my clients will come into the building and they will see me working on the front desk, answering phones, dealing with clients as they come in. Sometimes they'll see me working in the resource center, helping people who don't have an employment consultant who need some assistance. Maybe they're students, or maybe they're already working and they just want to come in and print off a resume. And that's not in my job description, but I volunteer to do it anyways because I'm flexible. And I know that if we don't have somebody who's sitting at the front desk, it's very difficult for everyone to get their jobs done because, clients are coming in, there's no one there to help them. So it's really important to be able to do that sometimes. And it's difficult. I won't lie. Sometimes when I work on the front desk, I don't do everything properly or I have to call someone and ask for help. But the fact is that I'm willing to take that on. I'm willing to do things that are not in my job description to help out everybody. Think about your own experience. When did you show flexibility in the workplace? What was it that you did? Did you maybe stay late to finish something? I've done that as well. I've had clients who said, "Oh my goodness, Jessica, I really want to apply for this job, but it closes at 6:00 today." And I'll say, "Okay, I'm gonna stay a few minutes after work and I'm gonna get this resume done for you so that you can apply for this job." That's showing flexibility. Did you help out with another job that wasn't necessarily your own? Maybe you took on a different role. That's a whole other level of flexibility. When I first started at Yes Employment, I worked with youth. And then I went on to kind of just work with all clients. And now I work with newcomers to Canada. So I've taken on a few different roles and I've shown some flexibility, with regards to what I'm willing to do in this organization. All of those things would be really good answers. So think about your own experience. What have you done? Where have you shown flexibility in your work? And then really kind of have that story prepared to tell the employer because it's really, really, really important. Another question is, talk about a time when you were new on the job and you had a lot to learn. How did you manage that? So again, We all have to go through learning in our job. I learn new things every day. I really love to sign up for, little courses and stuff to help me with my job. I love that kind of stuff. But I can tell you that when I started at Yes Employment, it was a huge learning curve. I had so many new things to learn. New systems, new like reporting systems. I learned a lot about computers and technology in general. It wasn't something that was a huge part of my job when I was a teacher, but it became a massive part of my job when I started as an employment consultant. So really think about, perhaps there was a time when you started a job and you had a lot of learning. Explain that. How did you manage that? How did you remember all the things that you were learning? So an example is like, somebody says, I love to learn new things. When I was new to marketing, I immersed myself, in the blogs, the video presentations and books available, courses that were out there. And in fact, I still do that. Things change rapidly in this industry, so I make a point to stay informed. And it's the same with my job, like taking on, learning, reading articles, learning from other employment consultants that I meet at conferences. All of those things mean that I'm taking on new learning in my job. And the things that I do to kind of remember that is if I go to a conference or if I attend a workshop, I'll like create a little folder about it on my computer. And then any information from there, if it's hard copy, I'll scan it and I'll put it in. I'll put it in that folder. If it's websites, I'll, make a Word document and store it in there so I can access that learning again. Because I'm very much, I hate having paper everywhere. So I really like to have everything streamlined on my computer. And now, since we've been working from home, partially, is sometimes I'm at home and sometimes in the office. So, if I store it in, my central storage system where I can access anywhere, then I don't have to worry about not having that information. So that's definitely, how I retain all that information is I definitely create folders, keep it all organized in there. But taking on those learning opportunities has been a really important part of my job as well. And 5.5 years in, I'm still learning things. There's still things to learn about this job. But when you start a new job, there's going to be a lot of learning. So thinking about, how you remember that and how you went about, learning from others in the organization as well is a big deal. Talking to people who've maybe been there for 5-10 years and asking them, well, how do you do things? How do you organize yourself? How do you manage your caseload? How do you get all the things done at the end of the night before closing? Whatever it is, you can learn from people in the organization as well. They're often very valuable people to get to know because they can give you a lot of information. I know it was the case with me. I talked to a lot of my colleagues who'd been doing the job for like 10 plus years. They had some great information on how to manage caseload, work with clients, organize everything. They were awesome. So definitely use them as well. Another question that you might get asked is give me an example of how you set goals for yourself. So, in a lot of jobs too, there's going to be the expectation that you're going to be setting, some goals for yourself throughout the year. And they want to know that you're focused on goals because they want to know that you really want to improve. That's an important thing for a lot of employers, is that you're going to take that initiative to improve yourself and your knowledge. So really think about an example that talks about the steps that you took to accomplish something in your career. This is an example from one of my previous clients. I wanted to become a licensed immigration consultant. I researched the course and also the labor market and applied for the course. It was a lot of work, but I broke the work up into manageable chunks and dedicated 3 nights a week to my studies. I also joined online support groups through my course to get others' perspectives and their support as well. Okay, so this person really talked about how they did it. They dedicated a few nights a week to do this. They did a lot of research beforehand. All of those things are really good when you're setting a goal. So thinking about your own experience, have you ever set a goal for yourself? And that can also mean, have you tried to learn a new skill or take on some new knowledge? How did you do it? What steps did you take? And how did you organize your time is really important, especially if you're doing a course outside of work. I know how hard that can be. It's a lot of work. And so really kind of being able to explain how you did that is really good for employers. So they know that if they need you to take on extra learning or they want you to do it, that you're going to be capable of doing that, because in our world now, everything is changing so fast, and there's, so many new things that we have to learn. I can't even list all of the new skills I've learned since we've started working partially from home. I have learned so many new skills about technology. I had never actually been live on Facebook until we started working from home. So I had to learn all of these new skills. And, I think a lot of the time, like, my employers were fairly confident that I would be able to handle it, because in the past I had shown that I could set goals and I could learn new learning. So this is going to become more and more important, in the future, is to be able to learn new things, because technology, there's all this new technology that comes out all the time, and we have to be able to take that on board. And a lot of that is going to involve setting goals to learn it if it's not something that you know. So that's it's a really good question to prepare yourself for as well. Another question, and they can ask this in different ways, but think about the most exciting or energizing aspect of your current job or most recent position. What did you specifically enjoy about it, and why? So can sometimes be a tricky question, because you really need to know why the employer is asking this. And they're really asking it to see, are you going to be a good fit for the job you're applying for? So your answer should reflect the job you're applying for. Therefore, you might not always have the same answer to this question. It depends on what job that you're actually in the interview for. So for example, if the job you're applying for has a lot of interactions with people and it's very fast paced, then your answer should reflect that. So it could be something like, in my last job, I really enjoyed the fact that I was always meeting new clients and I always had a new challenge to work on. I also love the fast-paced environment. You're not going to say something like, in my last job, I really love the fact that I could work alone in my office all day. Because that's probably going to show them that you're maybe not the right person for the job. So in this case, you've really got to put yourself, in the employer's mind and say, why are they actually asking this? What do they want to hear? What are they looking for? Okay, so, when we're trying to answer this question, what we really want to think about is what is similar about your last job and the job you're applying for. So kind of think through, or, if you're a visual person, you can write it out. What are all the similarities? And then of that list of similarities, which one did you like the best? Because you're still being honest and you're saying that this was something that you really liked, but it's also reflecting the job that you're applying for. Because a lot of people, I think, can get caught up in, they really answer the question from their own honest perspective. But they don't really think about, the job that they're applying for, or the fact that their employer is really going to be wondering, is this person actually going to fit into this job? In my current job right now, I'm always meeting new people. There's always a new challenge, and I love that. And that was the same when I was a teacher. There was always a new challenge every day. No 2 days were the same. And so that's probably my favorite thing about both of the jobs that I've done. So that would be a really good thing to say if I was interviewing for my position right now. So definitely the most important thing about this question is to find those similarities so that you're showing the employer that you are indeed the right person for the job. Give an example of how you worked as part of a team successfully. So again, most of us have to work as part of a team at some point. We have to work with other colleagues. And you know what? Your employer wants to know that you can do that. They don't have time, to solve disputes between, colleagues all the time. So they want to know that you can work as part of a team. Okay. So thinking about your own experience, think about, when did your team really work well together? What did you do? How did everyone work together? Did you divide up the tasks? Did you create time frames? Did you use organizational software? Did you pick roles based on each member's strengths? Whenever I do teamwork with people, somehow I always end up doing the presenting part, because I actually don't mind that. There's some people who really like doing, the background research. which is not my favorite thing in the whole world, but I really like to talk and I don't mind presenting. So, I usually end up with those roles because that's my strength. And then what was the outcome of this teamwork? Did you, finish your project early? Did you really impress your boss? Did you make a customer's day? That part is really important as well to kind of explain the outcome. So all of this work, resulted in a customer being very happy or, your boss being very impressed. But whatever story you tell, you need to come out looking like you know how to work as part of a team. And, we all know that sometimes it doesn't happen. You're not going to have this perfect team experience every time, but you definitely want to tell a story that showcases all the best things that you've done. So tell me about a time when you showed initiative and took charge of a problem or a situation. So again, employers really like it when their employees can take initiative sometimes when it's appropriate. Sometimes you're not going to be able to take charge, but there's situations when you can. So another one of my examples is one of my colleagues' clients showed up at the wrong time for their appointment. So my colleague was busy with another client, and this client who came in, like they thought their appointment was at 1:00, and they were really upset that it wasn't going to happen, and they just wanted to apply for a few jobs. So I said, you know what, I have a few minutes. I took the initiative, sat down with them, helped them tailor their resume for this job, and they were really happy, that we could do that. And then my colleague said, I'll reach out to them for their next appointment. But taking the initiative in something like that means that, again, this client was happy. They left getting what they needed that day, which is really important. So thinking about your own experience, did you ever take charge and solve a problem? What did you do? And what was the outcome? And I'm sure you've all done this at some point in your careers, but really think about a time, when you really shone, like you really, took the initiative and really solved a problem. So have a think about your own experience, because this is something, that can really impress an employer, is you being able to do that and having the skills to take initiative. So before we finish off, I just wanted to talk about a few important points to remember about these behavioral questions. You can use the job description to help you determine what questions you might be asked. For example, if in the job description it says they're looking for someone who can troubleshoot technical problems, then they might ask you to explain a time when you did that. So they might not just ask you a yes, no. They might say, can you troubleshoot technical problems? They might say, tell me about a time when you solved a technical problem, okay? Or if they want someone who can work as part of a team, they're going to ask you to explain a time when you worked as part of a team. If they're looking for someone who will need to be a leader, then they'll probably ask you to tell about a time, when your leadership skills were tested, or when your leadership skills really shone, when you did a really good job as a leader, or both. Okay, so really kind of go through the job ad. That's going to give you a clue as to some of the behavioral questions that they might ask. And always tailor your answers for the job you're applying for. So really think about what they want to hear, okay? And it doesn't mean that you have to lie or make up stories, but you really do need to focus on what the employer wants to hear, what would impress them, and what skills, experience, and knowledge are they looking for, and try and highlight that. And the one thing as well that's really important is once you've told your story, it's okay just to pause and stop. And that's going to let the interviewer know you finished, and then they can continue on with the other questions. And I know some people feel, that's hard for them. I'm the same. If I hear silence, I like to fill it with my voice. But just make sure that you do that, because sometimes you can give a really good example, and then if you start talking more and more, you almost talk yourself out of that really good example. So it's okay to take a quick pause, and then they'll know that you're finished. And it's also okay to ask for the question to be repeated, especially if it's a two-part question. So don't be afraid to do that either. It's better to ask for clarification than to not answer the question properly. So I hope everybody that you found this to be really helpful. Thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next month at the next live event. Bye.